Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, Managing Editor of Canada's Podcast. Joining me today on Calgary's podcast is Paul Stoya, who is a singer in Calgary. Thanks, Paul, for joining us today.
Thank you, Mario. Thanks for having me on.
Well, let me ask you, were you born a singer?
It was my mother who told me at 4 years old, she would catch me standing on the kitchen countertop sometimes with either a remote in my hand or anything in my hand, singing like I was like Elvis or something. It didn't matter what music was on. I'd always pretend like I was on stage at 4 years old.
And what were you singing at that age?
Usually Elvis. She was a huge Elvis fan.
Oh,
She
yeah.
also loved a lot of like gospel music as well. So
Yeah.
it was either gospel music or Elvis. And then my older siblings were born in the 80s, so they were really big into rock and Bon Jovi. So it's kind of a vast array of different music I was exposed to.
So music was always part of your life since a young age?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my father was actually the director of the orchestra at our church, and he was an amazing trumpet player. And my mother was a mandolin player, and they both sang as well. They sang duets, so very musical family.
Yeah. When was it, when you growing up, like when was it then you kind of thought this is kind of what you want to do, right? Or do more of?
Yeah, I guess it began in high school. I took a music course just for the sake of getting better marks, and I had this. I was thinking of being like a lawyer or something like that when I started high school, and I took this music course, and it was the first unit was a choir, and so the teacher would have us all sing in unison because he was trying to match our voices. And then he said, "Okay, everyone stop except for Paul." And back then, my outer ear wasn't developed, so I had no idea what was coming out of me. So he'd give me a scale, and I'd be like, "Oh," and he'd be like, "Paul, do you know what's coming out of you?" I'm like, "I have no idea." And then, so he was the one. His name was Mr. Hagedorn, awesome music teacher. He was the one who really pushed me. And I guess it began in the 11th grade for me. There was a production of Les Miserables that was being done in town, the famed Broadway musical.
Yeah.
And it was being done by Gord Davis, who's a very well-known director. And actually his son had done a lot of work on Broadway in New York. And so my teacher pushed me to go to the audition. And I think it was at the audition that they really instilled into me that I was meant to do this, because they ended up not calling one of the persons they had in mind for the lead role of Javert. And they gave the role on the spot at 17. So
Wow.
that was I think that was the moment.
So, when did you start like looking at this as a career?
I have to say it was the following year in grade 12. The director, one of the artistic directors of that company back in Kitchener, Ontario, that's where I was born, offered to give me training and really thought that my voice was meant for opera. And so I began the foundational training of opera in grade 12. Discover that part of my voice. Then I began to discover the world of opera. I realized, okay, this is definitely something I think I could do as a career. And it was definitely reinforced by professionals that I'd meet that would tell me, you have an opera voice. So it was really, I guess I was 18 years old in grade 12 when I really decided I want to do this for a career.
Join our thriving community of like-minded individuals who share a passion for success and innovation. CanadasPodcast.com. Subscribe now.
And so what happened after that, after high school with your music?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, Mario, because like I went to college, I went to a school, I began training, but the technique that I was taught it didn't work. It caused issues. I actually had a lot of vocal problems that came from it. And then I tried probably over the next 10 years trying to find a teacher who could teach me properly. And unfortunately, the progression of me losing my voice just continued. It went on for years and years. And so back then, I could say I had a very small, faint sound. Definitely the sound I had in high school. And 33 friend who heard me sing in a bathroom at a church. He was just like outside in the corridor, and he said, "Listen, you told me you tried all this training. I had applied to so many programs that I was rejected for." And he said, "Why don't you try applying worldwide?" He's like, "You haven't been able to find the right training here. What if it's just the people around you just don't see it?" And he gave me this saying. He said, "Paul, you're not going to find the right people until you're willing to leave the wrong people." And so I listened to him, and I put out about 300 applications worldwide, like everywhere, Europe, the US. And I ended up getting a call from a company in Italy who they heard my recording, and they said, "We think there's great potential here. We'd like to audition you." And so I scrapped up my last $2,000 I had in my savings account, and I went to Italy on probably the most economic trip ever known to man. It was a miracle. I was able to make it there and back on $2,000. But when I auditioned, it was this beautiful villa they had, and were amazing opera singers there. And the one owner of the company said, "We're really sorry it didn't work out for you, that you didn't get the right training you needed, but we see great potential. We're going to help you. We're going to train you." And that is really where the voice that you hear today when I perform, that's where it was birthed in Italy. And my teacher's name is Francesco Faccini. I was in Lucca, Italy, just about an hour west of Firenze, Florence.
Yeah.
And so I lived there for a time. It was about 6 months. I was there, and that's when I discovered this voice. And so and it was also his partner, Paola Abid. They own the company called Opera Stage. And I can say, till the day I die, it began there,
Wow. So, so if you fast forward in some sense, and we'll get into what you sing now, but what happened after that? And the transition, say, from opera to more modern music, if you want to say it.
So that brought on a host of opportunities. One was a teacher, Michael Trim, and as to progress, he realized I was in a larger vocal category known as the Dramatico Helden class. And so there's a specialist in the US that he knew, and Michael Trimble was probably one of the most renowned teachers in US history for opera. And so he accepted me into his studio, and so I trained with Michael in the US for 2 years. And he had a wonderful respect for all kinds of singers, be it Ray Charles, be it any country singer. And so he really introduced me to the concept of being able to sing any genre with a solid technique, and there's only a few things you have to change. And so that opportunity led to me to train in Berlin.
Wow.
I did an audition afterwards, and I went to Berlin, and I got to work with a maestro, and we continued on time here. I came back to Canada, but I worked with his maestro. His name was Byron Knudsen. He used to be director of the Young Artist Program at the Komischoper in Berlin. And so I guess that was the key transition, because there's an opportunity that came that he highly encouraged me to do in France. And it was a program in the south of France called Lyrique en Provence. And it was held by a renowned opera singer from Paris, and she also sings regularly at the Vienna State Opera, and also the chef de chant of the Paris Opera. So he was like the head coach of the Paris Opera. So I got accepted into this program. I went and did it, and it was really Sophie that introduced me to a whole nother world of singing, because she also sang jazz.
Ah.
And it was a really interesting program, because it was a really intense program. And we were there 12, 16 hours a day. They covered everything from acting to presence to, everything we had to know about the technique. And so it was a fusion show that we were actually gearing up to. It was a jazz, pop, and opera fusion show. And when you hear it, you think, that's crazy. Who's ever done that? But it was actually an amazing show. It flowed together so well. And so when I saw my colleagues in France, how they embrace jazz, they embrace pop, while also being opera singers, I have to say this was a foreign concept to me. And it was in the months afterwards that I really dug into the work I did in high school, where I actually did sing some jazz in high school. We had a jazz band, and even in my undergrad, I had done a little bit of work with a mini big band. And so all that was put to sleep for like 20 years, because I was just so focused on opera, right?
Yeah.
And it was really in the aftermath of that show in France that I said, you know what? I don't have to just limit myself to opera.
Yeah,
I can explore all the repertoire I love, and then just the Sinatra swing style, it just suited my voice so much. And so I just made the decision for a time to explore that.
All right. So when did you come to Calgary?
I came to Calgary just about 4 years ago in 2021.
And what was the reason for coming to Calgary?
So I worked, considering, I started my real technique when I was like 33. I'm 39 now. So, in 8 years, it's, it takes a while to train the voice. So I needed what they call a day job. And so I went to seminary in Toronto in my late 20s. And I began a career focusing more on, not as like a full-time like pastor that preaches all the time. I focus more in my master's on the pastoral counseling side of things. So I offered a lot of mentorship, a lot of pastoral counseling.
Okay.
And so one of my colleagues saw that there was an opportunity for me here in Calgary, and I ended up getting hired by a church in the Northwest. And so I did a lot of work in multiple areas of ministry, be it in hospital ministry, one-on-one mentorship, one-on-one, pastoral counseling. And so that was my day job. And so that's what actually took me to Calgary. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was your day job. And then your night job was belting out the tunes. Now, now I didn't ask before, but are you Italian?
No, I'm my family and background is Romanian.
Romanian.
But in the lineage, there are people from Italy for sure. Like if you look back, we definitely have Italian blood, and I'm, my oldest brother's just as big as me, but he's like 7 inches taller, and so probably some sort of Roman soldier blood in there. Okay.
So the reason I asked is obviously because one of the things you're known about town, so to speak, for is singing of Frank Sinatra. Tell me how that came about. Like, what was it, about Frank that you wanted to pursue this?
Yeah, so it began with my father. My father had such a huge love for Frank Sinatra. and Pavarotti. Those were his two favorite singers. So like whenever he'd have a CD or anything playing in the car, it'd either be Pavarotti or Frank Sinatra. And so I think for me, when I really tuned in to listening to Sinatra, it happened, I think it was the Christmas of 1998. My father bought a cassette of the original Sinatra and Bing Crosby Christmas album they did. And, you know, I loved Christmas tunes, and I just began to sing along with that cassette whenever we'd be doing deliveries. And he worked he delivered grandfather clocks. He made grand and kitchen cabinets. So I'd always help him, you know, with delivery and things like that. And so it was one of those rides, we were delivering grandfather clock, and I just started to sing along. And I was trying to like mimic Sinatra. I think it was Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
And my dad was like, Paul, you sound a lot like Sinatra, you know? And so I can say that was definitely the first time I was ever exposed to Sinatra, but it was nothing I ever thought I'd make a career of, probably until high school, where I dabbed around with it a few times. So it was definitely my father's love for Sinatra.
Now, besides in Calgary here and in local places, where have you sung Sinatra?
In high school, I had a lot of opportunities. We had actually a small jazz band. Actually, I shouldn't say small. It was about 20 to 25 players. And we had a wonderful music teacher who just had an immense love for jazz, and that was his specialty.
Yeah.
And so there was a few times that I was able to sing for them. So there's a few jazz standards. I remember we did a version of Tuxedo Junction that had a male vocal line to it that was just wonderful. So that was probably my first experience. And then there's a couple recitals there where I'd throw in a couple Sinatra tunes while also doing some of my musical theater stuff and my opera stuff. And it would always take people aback because they're like, when you sing that crooning style, it suits you.
Yeah.
But my vocal teachers at the time would say, no, you're meant to be an opera singer, and kind of put me in this box, you know, I got to be an opera singer.
Yeah.
So I can say that it was I definitely tried it. I mean, I learned a bunch of the tunes. I probably spent, you know, a few hundred hours, you know, learning all the songs in high school.
Wow.
But the opera was dominant in my mind, and also the narrative that people were trying to push on me, you know.
Stay ahead of the game with our expert tips and strategies that will help your business thrive in a digital era. CanadasPodcast.com. Subscribe now.
So, though, in the last little while, or you know, in the past year, you've sung Sinatra beyond Calgary, right? And maybe describe where you've been and what, you know, where you've done that.
Yeah. So after France, you know, I really began to develop that, I also did a recital. It was actually a Cole Porter recital I did in university. Way back when. So I dust up some of that music that I had. And it's interesting. My wife is a remarkable pianist, and she actually studied with the former partner of Derek Stahl, who's a renowned jazz pianist here in town.
Yeah.
And she knew Derek, and she said, you know, why don't you meet up with Derek? Because, you know, if opera is not going to happen right now, I don't know. Side story, you know, the opera world has experienced a lot of hits since COVID. You know, a lot of companies have gone down.
Oh, yeah.
There's still a lot of people who are fulfilling contracts from, like, you know, the time of COVID. So I just decided I got to do something in between. And so I contacted Derek Stahl, and we met up a few times, and we just ended up, you know, working together on this repertoire. And I remember the first time I sang My Way for him at his place, he literally had tears in his eyes. He's like, Paul, you got to do this. Like, I've never heard someone do My Way like that.
Yeah.
Ever. And so I began performing with him in town, and then eventually we decided to do like a full out show. You know, we did like a Sinatra tribute show, and it took us months to put together, and you know, a lot of music, assembling a band, and all that. And so we made our debut at the Polaris Theatre in the far north. It's a small theater. I don't know if you've ever been there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we did a small show there. And the great thing about the Polaris is that they have an amazing system of computers and sound, and they have amazing cameras. And so I got for the first time ever, I got a very high quality recording of me singing "Fly Me to the Moon."
Oh yeah.
And so I just did a blitz of applications. Like I listen to all these podcasts on how to formulate, you know, your pitch in an email. And I basically used all the tools I had in a previous sales job when I lived in Vancouver. I had a sales job, and like, you know, going through every single target in the market. I literally would contact everything. Like for example, retirement homes. There's 91 retirement homes. I contacted every single one of them, and 30 of them hired me. So that was my start. And then same thing with venues. I found a great website called Indie on the Move, and they basically have almost every talent buyer in North America. So I just did a blitz, and I applied everything in Canada, the US, and I ended up getting an offer and a call from the Catalina Jazz Club in Hollywood. And so I got to make my debut there. And Derek actually is longtime friends with the renowned trumpeter Jens Lindemann. And so he contacted Jens, and Jens ended up recommending for me an amazing Grammy Award-winning pianist named Quinn Johnson, who backed me at the Catalina, and had a few other great players. Another Grammy Award winner named Alex Budman, who backed me at the Catalina. And then that just opened up more doors here in Calgary. You know, I got an offer to begin these tributes at the King Eddy, and our first show was just totally sold out. Is they've just been wonderful, and it's growing and growing. And then I don't know if you know, I made my debut in Las Vegas about a month ago. So
yeah. And so Vegas as well. So Paul, I understand, and full disclosure, for our viewers out there, I was at one of your shows, and you mentioned how that this is now a full-time career, right?
It is, yeah.
How to turn it into a little bit of a business thing here. Let me ask you, like, what is that like now? For you, that okay, this is a business for you now, right? So you've got your artistic talent, you're singing on one side, but then on the other side, you got to do the business, do the marketing, all that type of stuff. How do you combine?
Yeah. Well, I'm really lucky because my amazing wife, Meg, I met her here in Calgary shortly after I moved here, and we got married in 2022. She works for some pretty big companies over the years, and does a lot of legal writing and business writing for big projects, and so she has that background. And so she helps me with all the writing on my website. Even if I send out an email to a big jazz company or something like that, I always get her to approve it. And same thing with like even simple things like invoicing and how to structure cold calls, pitches, all of that. It took a lot of research. I never owned my own business before, other than my vocal studio. I was a vocal teacher for about 5 years. So it's interesting because, I did have to quit my day job to do this.
Yeah.
And, I still keep in contact with a lot of my friends from all the churches I've worked with, love them to death. But it's very different from getting like a steady paycheck every 2 weeks to, you get a contract, you go get to sing a gig. and then you got to track down someone 7 weeks later to get your pay.
Yeah.
It's a very different world. It's a very different world being having a self proprietorship. So
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was wonderful, Paul. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today.
awesome, Mario. Thank you so much.
All right, that was Paul Stoya, singer in Calgary. I'm Mario Tanaguzzi, managing editor of Canada's Podcast. Thanks for joining us today.